Get on the ground, hands up. The shout cracked through the alley like thunder. Officer Daniels smirked as he lifted his weapon, boots crunching against gravel, adrenaline pulsing, not from danger, but from something else. Bet he's fast. He chuckled, nudging his partner. Let's find out. The black man ahead of them sprinted hard, ragged clothes flapping as he rounded the corner. To them, he looked scared hunted. That was enough. No protocol, no dispatch call, no warning. Just laughter and loaded weapons chasing a silhouette they never stopped to question. He wasn't armed, wasn't dangerous. He was just running. Go left. Daniels barked. We'll box him in. His partner grinned, already moving. Neither of them wondered why he was running. They didn't care. This wasn't about justice. It was about control. Power disguised as law. Behind them, no backup. No radios clicked on. Just the sound of sirens somewhere nearby and the thrill of the chase. Don't let him get away. One of them shouted, voice tinged with excitement. Let's make him work for it. And still, the man ran, faster, deeper into the maze of brick and shadows, not realizing. They weren't playing the same game. John Boyega didn't look back. His heart pounded, not from fear, but focus. The script ran through his head as clearly as his lines had that morning. He was deep in character, his face sweaty, shoes discarded for realism. The city was his set. Sirens flared in the distance, casting blue and red against damp alley walls. Perfect timing, he thought. The crew must have nailed the audio blend this time. A shout behind him. Freeze, he smirked. Nice improv. The scene was raw. It was meant to feel dangerous. That's how it was written. He turned a corner, glancing toward the dumpster where a hidden camera had been placed earlier. The lens poked out just enough to catch the action. Then came another shout, louder, harsher. Down on the ground. Now. John's pace slowed. His smile faded. That didn't sound like his crew. He spun, half curious, half confused. 2 officers. Guns drawn. Their eyes locked on him like he was prey. A sudden chill crawled up his spine. This wasn't part of the scene. John stopped, hands immediately flying into the air. It's a movie. He called out, loud and clear. I'm an actor. We're filming. But their boots didn't slow. Their weapons didn't lower. This is a film shoot. I'm John Boyega. He shouted again, heart racing now for an entirely different reason. His. Breath caught as one of them reached for cuffs. I said, this is a... Shut it. Hands where I can see him. He froze. They didn't hear him. No dash worse. They didn't believe him. The closer they came, the more his voice lost power. His identity, his status, his work, none of it mattered. All they saw was a black man in tattered clothes, running. One officer barked again, louder. Face down now. John's voice cracked. You're making a mistake. A hand gripped his wrist, twisting it hard. They weren't listening. They never intended to. His cheek slammed against the pavement. A knee dug into his back, pressing weight into bone. A sharp burn surged through his ribs. Then shouts. Familiar voices. Hey, that's John Boyega. It's a film shoot. He's the lead actor. John heard them, his crew, spilling out from behind dumpsters and doorways, yelling, panicked, desperate. The officers paused but didn't move. One turned slightly. Stay back. Scene's over. No, you don't understand. That's John from Star Wars. We have permits. Even then, the grip on John's wrist didn't loosen. The pressure on his spine didn't ease. He twisted his neck just enough to catch a glimpse, faces pale, mouths open, cameras raised. He wasn't invisible anymore, but he wasn't free either. A bystander stood across the street. Phone up, silent, watching. Not helping, not stopping. Just documenting. John's chest rose and fell under the weight of the officer's knee. He didn't fight back. There was no point. He looked up, caught the bystander's gaze. Recognition flickered. Then hesitation. In that moment, John felt something crack inside him. Not a bone. Something deeper. It didn't matter who he was. What roles he'd played. What causes he'd fought for. What platforms he'd used to speak out. Right now, he was nothing but a body on the ground. They didn't see a global star. They saw threat, movement, skin. And that was all they needed. As sirens wailed louder in the distance and murmurs swelled around him. A single thought echoed through his mind, sharp and undeniable. No matter how famous you are, they still only see your skin first. Let's make them feel it today, John said, tugging at the frayed edge of his costume. The fabric was rough, stained, ripped in the right places. It looked like it belonged to someone running for his life. He greeted the crew with nods and quiet smiles, focused, present, determined. The indie set buzzed with energy, but John's calm center held firm. The director clapped once. Remember, no polish. Make it documentary real. Like we snuck into a nightmare. John ran a hand across his buzzed hair and exhaled slowly. He wasn't just acting today. He was carrying something. If they feel it, he murmured to himself, maybe they'll finally see it. This wasn't just a scene for him. It was a mirror. One he hoped the world would be brave enough to look into. But mirrors, like truth, can cut if you're not ready. Even as he prepared for the scene, John's mind wandered uninvited to all the times he didn't get to play a role. When the world saw him, not the actor, not the name, just the skin. There was that time in Paris. Designer suit, red carpet. And yet, he was followed in a luxury boutique, like a suspected thief. Another day, someone mistook him for security at his own premiere. He never forgot that dinner reservation in London. 3 white guests were greeted before him, despite him arriving first. The host didn't look up until someone whispered his name. Only then did the smile appear. It always came after. It's like they see my skin before my name, he thought. Bitterly. He didn't complain, but it stuck with him. Every single time, the world celebrated his voice when he gave that raw, trembling BLM speech, but he remembered the calls afterward, the warnings, the risk to his career. Don't be too loud, they said. Don't be too angry. He'd been quiet for a while, but this film? This was him speaking again, through motion, through tension, through the chase, and no one could mute that. They huddled around a coffee-stained paper plan, the director's voice crisp. We're not blocking off the street. No big cameras. No cops on standby. John raised an eyebrow. So we're going full guerrilla? Exactly. Gritty. One man, wrongfully accused, running like his life depends on it. We want people watching to flinch. John gave a tight nod. He loved it. It wasn't just about cinema. It was about forcing the world to sit in discomfort. No edits. No safety nets. He tightened the laces on his worn sneakers and stretched his legs. This role's more than lines, he said quietly to his co-star. It's history chasing us. And we're still running. He meant it. The costume might have been fiction, but the fear? That would be pulled from somewhere real. He walked into position. Alley damp. Silence settling like fog. The crew, scattered, some ducked behind dumpsters, others hidden in doorways. Cameras were tucked, invisible to the public eye. The director whispered into his headset, rolling in 3... 2... John shook out his shoulders and laughed once under his breath. There was no script for what was about to happen, only the weight of centuries... and a city that still hadn't learned to look past a man's skin before pulling a trigger, literal or not. He took off running, and the line between fiction and reality blurred faster than any of them could imagine. We wanted to make people feel what it's like to be hunted. We didn't know the real world would do it for us. You got permits for this? One officer barked, his voice sharp and loaded with suspicion, as he stepped into the frame. John's eyes narrowed, watching as the two white officers bypassed the clipboard-wielding director, who stood calmly nearby and instead zeroed in on the black members of the crew. Without a word of greeting or curiosity, they approached the camera operator first, demanding proof of permission. The officer's tone wasn't inquisitive. It was accusatory. One of them locked eyes with John, who stood a few feet away, and said flatly, "Didn't ask you, son." John's pulse quickened, not from fear, but frustration. The unspoken message was clear. No matter who you are, your voice doesn't matter here. The officers' badges gleamed under the afternoon sun, weapons holstered but ready, casting a long shadow over the crew's equipment, the cameras, the scripts, the artistry. It was a clash of power in stark contrast. Authority confronting creativity. Uniforms facing vulnerability. John clenched his fists at his sides, aware that this wasn't about safety or rules, it was about control, and he was watching it unfold all over again. One officer stepped forward, his tone colder this time. "Let me see your ID." The black camera operator fumbled with his wallet, handing over his identification with steady hands. The assistant, also black, was next. Asked for the same proof. Meanwhile, the white assistant director stepped forward, raising his hand slightly. "Do you want to see mine, too?" The officer's dismissive wave was swift, almost casual. "No need," he said, eyes never leaving the black crew members. John's jaw tightened, his silence louder than any protest. This was no coincidence. It was a deliberate act, a statement without words, only black bodies. Needed scrutiny here. The officers weren't there to understand the story being told or respect the artistry behind it. They wanted to assert dominance. John's mind replayed. Memories being followed in stores, doors closing quietly in his face. The sting of bias, veiled or blatant, was a constant companion. The white assistant director stepped in with a polite, practiced tone. "We'll make sure everything's in order next time, officer." The officers exchanged smirks, nodding slowly, as if granting permission to continue. Their departure was unhurried, almost leisurely, but the weight of their presence lingered. Like smoke in the air, crew members exchanged uneasy glances, their focus fractured. John's eyes searched the faces around him, hope, tension, resignation mingling in equal measure. No one spoke about what had just happened, but the silence was deafening. The energy on set shifted. The rawness of the scene no longer felt like choice. It felt like an echo of something deeper. John forced himself to breathe steadily, refusing to let the moment break him. Yet inside, he knew the unspoken truth. The injustice wasn't over. It had only just begun. Between takes, John stood beside his co-star, voice low and steady. They weren't curious. They were ready. His co-star nodded slowly. That got weird fast. John glanced around, eyes sharp. Most of the time, no. One's filming. These moments, they don't go viral. They don't spark outrage. He swallowed hard, feeling the weight of unrecorded stories, the countless invisible confrontations, the silent humiliations. They weren't here to understand or protect, he said quietly. They were hunting. His words hung heavy. Chilling reminder of a system designed to control, not to serve. John's gaze hardened with resolve. "We thought it was just a moment," he said, "but we didn't know it was a warning." "He's John Boyega. It's a movie. Stop." Voices erupted from the shadows as the crew dashed out, their calls urgent and frantic. John lay cuffed on the cold pavement, face pressed against the unforgiving ground, the weight of the officer's knee pressing harder than any pain he'd felt before. The sharp click of metal closing around his wrists echoed like a sentence. Somewhere above, A crew member's voice shook as a phone was thrust forward. Screen illuminated with John's IMDb, profile proof of his identity, his career, his reality. Officers glanced briefly, eyes flickering over the screen, but the hardness didn't fade. One muttered without conviction, "You should have told us sooner." John's voice was low, raw with frustration. "I did. I told you. I'm an actor. This is a scene." But his words seemed swallowed by the tension, dismissed like they were invisible. The contradiction stung bitterly. Here he was known worldwide, a face on screens, a voice against injustice, and yet reduced to suspicion, an assumption of guilt without hearing. The officer's refusal to listen wasn't just negligence. It was a refusal to see beyond the surface. John's breath hitched. The humiliation was not just physical, it was a public erasure of truth. A whisper cut through the crowd. "Wait, that's John Boyega. From Star Wars." Phones lifted like silent witnesses, capturing every moment, every second of injustice. John's eyes flicked to the gathering faces, mixed with curiosity and disbelief, but none stepped forward. They filmed. They whispered. They documented without intervening. His rage simmered beneath the surface, clashing with a deep, aching shame. This wasn't the first time the camera caught something raw, but now his own vulnerability was on display, that he felt exposed naked. In a spotlight no one asked for. Despite the crowd, John stood alone, powerless against a system that thrived on control and fear. The eerie quiet of the murmurs grew louder than any protest. This wasn't solidarity. It was a spectacle, and in that moment, the distance between bystander and victim felt impossibly wide. Within hours, the footage exploded online. #John Boyega detained trended worldwide. Hashtags multiplying like wildfire. Headlines clashed violently in the digital space. Star Wars actor aggressively confronted by police versus Boyega mistaken in raw film scene, officers respond to threat. Social media became a battlefield of narratives, each spin cutting deeper than the last. The police released a cold statement. Our officers responded to a perceived threat to public safety. No hint of regret, no acknowledgement of error, no suspensions, damage control. Thinly veiled as accountability. John watched the endless scroll of news clips and pundits debating, dissecting his every move as if he were a character in someone else's story, a spectacle to consume, not a man enduring trauma. The viral moment, instead of offering justice, amplified his isolation. His identity twisted and distorted, tangled in a web of public opinion and systemic bias. He wasn't just a victim of an incident. He became the symbol of a much larger, painful truth. Scrolling through his feed, John's gaze locked on an image, a meme splitting his face into two halves. Rebel hero on one side, thug running wild on the other. He said nothing. No words came. Instead, he sank deeper into silence, letting the weight settle. The digital world had stolen his dignity and turned it into entertainment. His pain wasn't private anymore. It belonged to every screen, every timeline. The world saw a meme, a moment frozen and ridiculed, not the man beneath. John's breath was steady but heavy. This was no performance. It was survival. And as the screen's glow faded from his eyes, he whispered to himself, I wasn't acting. I was surviving. The screen flickered to life with a body cam video, raw and uncut. Voices echoed from inside the patrol car, sharp and careless. Let's see how scared he gets when we roll up, one officer said, nudging his partner with a sly grin. They laughed, the sound cold, cruel. This wasn't about safety or duty. It was a game, a twisted thrill. The camera captured them stepping out, eyes scanning, ready for the chase. No empathy, no hesitation. The world watched in horror as the truth unfolded. This wasn't fear of danger. It was fear for control, a hunt for dominance. The footage spread fast, igniting fury across every corner of the internet. The mask of professionalism cracked, revealing a raw and ugly reality. Comments poured in, voices rising. This is systemic. This is racism disguised as law enforcement. This is why Black lives are endangered. The leaked clip exposed what many had felt but couldn't prove. The officers weren't chasing a suspect. They were chasing a black man for sport. The video was more than evidence, was a spark lighting a wildfire of outrage. Social media exploded like never before. Twitter threads swarmed with hashtags, #JusticeForJohn, #NotJustAbody, #Cameras Save Lives, each tweet a demand, a plea, a call for change. Celebrities took notice. Ava DuVernay's tweet went viral instantly. If they do this to John Boyega, imagine what they do to those without cameras. Athletes, activists, and artists joined in, amplifying the outrage. Virtual town halls streamed live, gathering thousands in solidarity. Messages flooded from all over the world, uniting voices against racial injustice and police brutality. John's story became a beacon, shining light on the shadows of systemic abuse. Digital protests turned into organized campaigns, pushing for transparency and accountability. The internet wasn't just reacting, it was mobilizing. This moment transcended a single incident. It became a symbol of a broader fight, echoing centuries of pain and resistance. As public pressure mounted, investigative journalists dove into the police department's records. One officer involved had 5 previous complaints, each quietly closed without consequence. Internal memos hinted at repeated racial profiling practices, dismissed as routine. Community members stepped forward, sharing stories of harassment and dismissal, voices finally finding space. The department's reputation cracked under the weight of scrutiny. No longer able to hide behind bureaucracy. Officials faced demands for real reform. The patterns revealed weren't isolated. They painted a picture of institutional failure. Accountability became unavoidable. John sat quietly before the camera, stripped of any glamour or pretense. He didn't shout or demand attention. Instead, he spoke with measured, wounded clarity. They didn't see a man. They saw a body to dominate, a toy to chase. His voice carried the weight of lived experience, resonating far beyond the screen. Millions listened. They heard more than an actor's words. They heard the truth of countless others silenced by prejudice. John became more than a victim. He became a voice for the unseen and unheard. Petitions soared, gathering millions of signatures within hours. Lawmakers faced relentless pressure to investigate and reform. Artists responded with protest murals. Filmmakers created documentaries. Activists organized rallies. The moment transcended personal pain, sparking a collective awakening. John's ordeal transformed into a rallying cry for justice. As the movement grew, one truth became clear. It stopped being about me. It started being about all of us. We failed. Not just Mr. Boyega, but the public trust, the police chief said, voice steady but weighed with the burden of months of scrutiny. Cameras captured every word as he continued, reading from a prepared statement. Our actions fell short of the standards we are sworn to uphold. We must do better. The apology was formal, measured no excuses, no DEFL, ECTIONS. It wasn't enough to erase the pain. But it was an acknowledgement that couldn't be ignored. For once, the system didn't hide behind silence or stonewalling. The sentence hung heavy in the air. A promise, a starting point. We are committed to real change, he concluded. But outside, the public knew this was only the beginning of a longer fight for justice. Officer Daniels submitted his resignation quietly before the internal review could conclude. His departure was a rare admission of accountability. Meanwhile, Officer Cruz was placed on unpaid leave, suspended pending further investigation, the department announced. Sweeping reform initiatives, mandatory anti-racism training, community oversight boards, and transparent reporting mechanisms. Activists responded with guarded optimism. "We've seen reform promises before," one organizer said. "This time, it has to be different." Results, not rhetoric. The demand for systemic overhaul grew louder. This wasn't just about individual actions. Anymore, it was about dismantling a culture that allowed such abuses to flourish. The officers' fates marked a shift, but the real work was just beginning. News. Outlets buzzed over the undisclosed settlement John received. But John's statement was clear and simple. Money wasn't the point. But now it has a purpose. Instead of keeping the payout, he donated it to a grassroots nonprofit dedicated to documenting police abuse through body cam footage and first-hand testimonies. His contribution helped build a growing archive proof of systemic issues too often ignored. By transforming his legal settlement into a tool for advocacy, John took his personal pain and turned it into collective power. The cycle of silence was breaking. The indie film Blurred was released globally. It became more than a movie. It sparked crucial conversations in classrooms, university forums, and activist groups. Educators praised it as a tool for empathy, helping viewers grasp the raw realities of racial injustice. The film blurred lines between art and activism, storytelling and social change. Its impact rippled through communities, hungry for awareness and reform. Blurred didn't just show the problem, it became part of the solution. Flashing cameras greeted John on the red carpet, his suit sharp, his posture calm. A reporter asked, "Was it worth it?" John paused, eyes steady. "Only if it changes something," he replied quietly. His words echoed the hopes of millions who longed for true justice. John's lasting message lingered as the story closed. Fame doesn't protect us, but truth does. And the camera never blinks. The screen faded to black. The audience exhaled, reminded that courage and visibility remain our strongest defenses against injustice. What would you have done if you saw this happening? The question hangs in the air, heavy and urgent. Imagine standing there, witnessing injustice unfold right before your eyes. Would you have stepped in or looked away? And what if he hadn't been famous? Would the officers have stopped then? We want to hear from you. Have you ever witnessed something like this? Share your experience below. Your story matters, and your voice can spark understanding. If this story moved you, show your support. Like the video, subscribe for more real stories that challenge injustice, and share this because silence protects. No one. Remember, your voice matters. Your action matters. Together, we can turn awareness into change and make the story count.